There is always a gap between every generation. Styles change, preferences change. What's cool now won't be cool in 5 years. Music, technology, language, cultural trends, even a sense of what's important and what's not. It's all constantly changing. So the older you get, the harder it is to keep up. As a result, a gap is created between generations of people, which makes understanding one another more difficult. Communication becomes more difficult. Leading and influencing those coming behind us sometimes feels impossible. But what if we stop long enough to realize that some things don't change at all? That maybe we all have more in common than we realize. If we can figure that out, then we just might have a chance. We just might be able to bridge the gap that so often divides us. Welcome to A Traveler's Guide to Generational Genius.
Well, hey everybody, let me welcome you again. I'm so glad that you're here, especially if you're here for the first time. Awesome that you have decided to join us. Welcome to summer, everybody. You made it. Students, you should be cheering and doing backflips at this point. You made it to summer. Parents are like, ready for the fall. I know how this works. I'm a parent, but we're beginning just a quick 3-week series here at the beginning of the summer that I'm calling a Traveler's Guide to Generational Genius. We all find that during the summer months is kind of a transitional season for us. It's not just from one like good season to the next good season, and summer's like the hot stuff in between, right? But it's kind of a transitional, even in stages of life. A lot of people graduate, this time of the year. People traveling and doing different things, and so people, if you're moving homes or if you're changing jobs, this tends to be the kind of year that we do that. And so as a result, our routines change. We kind of get off kilter a little bit, and we can sometimes take a break from the regular grind, right? And a lot of us have the opportunity to take vacation and to travel some. And here's the thing, for what you learn is when you watch people vacation, everybody's idea of vacation is a little different, right? For some, it is like, here's what vacation is. Go to the beach, sit under an umbrella all day, and then go and get seafood that night. That's vacation, and like that doesn't sound too bad, to be real honest with you. But for some, it's just like, that's not enough. That's not vacation. That's boring. I've got to do something, and I want to travel, and I want to explore, and go on an adventure and go to a place I haven't seen before. I mean, we got any of those people in here? Like, you just want to go, see, learn, discover. There's 2. All right. Well, great. Y'all should get together. The rest of us will go to the beach, apparently, or the lake, whatever it takes. But here's the thing. Back in the day, and I remember this day very well, before the internet, before cell phones, and before Travelocity.com and Yelp and all those websites. Before that, if you wanted to travel somewhere new, you would go and you'd get a guidebook, a travel guide to that area. I mean, that's what you would want to take with you. Back when I went to Europe, I took a book called Let's Go Europe. There's Frommers and Fodor's and Lonely Planet and all these different kind of travel books, but here's the thing, it wasn't just information about the place. It wasn't, well, I just want to learn about that. That wasn't it. It was really how to experience it. And it was always based on people's actual reviews. People would go to these places, the people that would write these books and put these descriptions down about the places to go would actually visit there, and they would spend time there, and they would try out different restaurants, and they would, sort of do the discovery part for you so that you could actually just enjoy the time when you were there. And so they would go and they would make recommendations. They would even tell you how much everything cost. And then every year they had to update it. It was brand new, every year. And so couldn't take last year's model because it might not be accurate for this year. That place might be shut down, or it might give you directions. It was great. I mean, that's what we used to do. But here's the thing. It wasn't everything, and you knew it. It was just the highlights. They would kind of highlight and talk about just some key points of interest, things that you might want to actually consider doing. And so here's the thing. With that in mind, my goal for this series, just for 3 weeks, we don't have long, so I just want to create just a traveler's guide to the next generation, to learning how to handle, to communicate with, and to pass things along to the next generation, how to deal with those who are coming behind us. And by next generation, I'm not just referring to Generation Z and millennials and Gen Xers, most of us in here, maybe a few baby boomers, thank you parents, That's not just what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about anybody who is coming along behind you. Anybody who is maybe at just a stage of life. It may be just, you're in a different season and they're in a season, behind you. And so you've got an opportunity. And here's the thing. This is why I think this is so important to talk about. Because again, it's not going to be everything. It's just going to be a quick traveler's guide. There's a lot we could say and communicate, but I just want to hit some of these highlights. And here's why. Because every single person in this room, whether now or at some point in the future, whether you're young or you're old, you will find yourself in a position of potential influence and authority in somebody's life. Whether that's in a person's life or a group of people. And for us, like, we get this, we know it, because in formal relationships, it's real obvious, right? I mean, maybe, if you're a boss of something, you've got, employees, an employer to employee kind of relationship. And there are things that they have authority over, and they can communicate things and ask for things and teach things, right? In order to do the job well. Or maybe it's, a teacher has students, coaches have their athletes, their players, and even parents. We get this, right? Parents have their kids, and so so we get that. Like, there's those formal, real obvious, well-defined relationships, and all of us are going to be in those at some point along the way. But maybe it's just in some of the less well-defined, the ones that aren't quite so obvious, that we find ourselves in. Maybe you're just at the end of your career and there's somebody around you who's just beginning their career. You have an opportunity to speak into their life. Maybe it's somebody who, maybe you're around a couple who is just about to get married, or maybe they're in their first year of marriage and you've been married 10 or 20 or 30 years. And so you have an opportunity to speak into their life. You know some things about marriage that they don't know yet. Maybe they hadn't learned it yet. They hadn't understood it. Maybe for some of you, it's just somebody who has just begun in their faith walk with Jesus. And you have an incredible advantage because, you've been a believer all your life. And you've, in fact, been in Sunday school for 25 years. So you're loaded with knowledge and understanding, and Christian lingo, Christianese. You know how to speak the lingo. You have an opportunity to speak into them and to invest in them. Maybe it's just a season of life, a stage of life. But here's the thing. But all of us will find ourselves in that place where we may have the potential to influence somebody's life, and it is our job to choose to do so. Scripture even talks about this. Psalm 78, Asaph is communicating in song form to the people of Israel, and he's reminding them, this is what we do. This is who we are, Israel. We will tell the next generation. Who? Well, the people who are coming after us. We will tell the next generation the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, his power, and the wonders he has done. We're just going to tell them so that the next generation would know them. We want to tell them, why? Well, so that they'll know them. So that the next generation would know them, even the children yet to be born, and they in turn would tell their children. So it's going to continue to pass down, not just parent to child, but generation to generation. Does that make sense? And then he continues, then they would put their trust in God. This would be the hopeful result. Then they would put their trust in God and would not forget his deeds and would keep his commands. And that really is the understanding. Scripture talks about that a lot, this idea of investing in the next generation. Now, here's the thing. I think we all, to some degree, get that. We know that. Maybe you're currently in a season like that where somebody's either investing in you or you're having an opportunity to invest in them in the workplace, or maybe it's in a hobby, or in a particular field of study. Maybe it's a student thing, or maybe it's just a season of life. But parents especially feel this. Parents, especially early on when you're just kind of figuring out the raising a child thing, which you never figure out, by the way, but you think you're going to figure it out, and so you're thinking about it a lot, and you're very burdened by this idea that I've got to pass on our values, and I've got to pass on these beliefs, and I'm nervous, and so I got to go back to church, so that they can teach them, and I think that's good for them to be like in a church place, in Sunday school, and they need to hear that stuff because I heard it when I was a kid and I hated it, but I don't know, I think it's good, and so we want to pass that stuff along, and parents feel this tension all the time, and yet what happens? We get older, right? We get older, our kids get older, the other people around us get older, or we, become the generation that we were so resistant against, so rebelled against when we were young, and we become that generation. We realize we don't understand the people below us. And we don't think they understand us, probably because they don't. And you remember, because it irritates you, especially as a parent, because it's like, you're just being who I was. And you get irritated and it's frustrating and you start pointing the finger and you start blaming it on them. And there's this generational gap and it's your fault. And it's, these crazy kids, these millennials these days, that's what we say. We categorize them and we point fingers and we say it's the technology and they're growing up with screens in front of their face. And I'm like, yeah, that's probably, has something to do with it, but they aren't going anywhere. And so you're not doing any good by yelling. And it's like, well, you throw your hands up in the air. I don't want to deal with them. They're a bunch of spoiled, irritating little brats and they don't want to work and they're going to live at home till they're 27. I mean, it's kind of how we feel, and our parents felt that way about us, and we just forgot. Grandparents felt that way about them. And here's the thing. It becomes disheartening. It's why parents stop caring quite as much. They care, but they stop trying quite as hard by the time their kids kind of get their own mind about them. Middle school on into high school, maybe it's college, maybe it's young adulthood. At some point, it's like I don't have a voice in their life. I did when they were young because they couldn't do anything without me. And then they just check, they got all crazy and got their own thoughts about them, and I don't like that, and I don't understand it, and you get frustrated and you quit trying. And that's why PTA and PTO has nobody in it by the time they hit high school and everybody in it when they're in, elementary school. It's amazing how that happens. Here's the problem, though. We overemphasize the generational gap instead of working really hard to become a generational genius. We just allow the gap and the differences to take their place in us, to really kind of dig in, and it irritates us. And it's like there's all this distance and there's a gap and there's nothing I can do about it. And look at all these, the quirks and the weird things, and look at the music they listen to and the way they dress and the way they, handle, their free time and what they do, and it's irritating. And you spend all your time thinking about that, and it's like, well, if I can't fix the gap, the misunderstanding, if they don't understand me, I don't understand them, then I can't communicate. And that's the scary part, right? But what if we took a different approach? What if we realized that the key to becoming a generational genius is to discover what's common to every generation? Okay, well, there's, a revelation. What if we realize that, there's nothing in common, like I'm just telling, no, there is. That's what you don't realize. It feels like it, I know. Because they're crazy, right? Kids these days, they're crazy. And you were crazy at one point. But there are some things, there are some characteristics, some qualities that exist and are desired by every single person in every single generation who has ever existed. And if we can figure out what some of those things are and begin to focus on those things instead of the things that divide us, because they're always going to divide us, because we just are different. We see the world differently. But if we can focus on what matters, then I think we have an opportunity to have influence. And we forget that. What if we actually took that approach? We just said, you know what, let me just go look for what's common between us. What is it that you and I both agree about? What is it that you and I both want and both desire in other people, in the people who are over us? What is it? And we forget. This is what we remember when we're kids, and we forget when we get older, that position only establishes authority, but not influence. Think about that. Your position, whether that's as a parent or a boss or a teacher or a coach or whatever your position is, or I've just been there, done that. I'm older than you. I'm a counselor. I'm in a position. I have knowledge. I have understanding. Whatever your position is, it does give you some authority, but it does not necessitate influence. It doesn't mean you're actually going to be able to convince them of anything you say you believe. So what do? How do you figure out what to do about that? They just don't understand me. They don't understand. I'm saying all the right things. I'm communicating like I'm trying to get on their level, trying to understand. That's the way we talk. And yet we keep seeing differences, and we realize that maybe there's some things in common that we're missing, things that we actually want, but that we're not providing. And so I want to try to help us clue in on some of these. To kind of hone in on just some simple thoughts, some areas of commonality between generations. It's not everything. Again, traveler's guide, okay? This is the pocket version. But hopefully just some of the key areas that I think if we could get this right, if we could begin to think about these things, it might open up doors to conversations that need to happen. And some of you are going, they do need to happen because I pushed back a long time ago. I stopped leading a long time ago. I stopped trying to speak their language and speak into their lives. I stopped doing that a long time ago. I stopped dealing with kids and with teenagers. Like I stopped that a long time ago because I just don't understand them and they don't understand me, and so they're not listening. It's like, well, so let's see if we can't find what's common. The way I want to do that today, I want to look at a story. It's actually a letter that the Apostle Paul wrote to a young man, his friend in ministry, a young man named Titus. There's actually 3 letters, 1st and 2nd Timothy, young man named Timothy who he had spoken into and nurtured and kind of mentored and sent off. And then there was also Titus. And we call these the pastoral epistles because this is where we get a lot of our leadership understanding within the church, a lot of the things we understand about being an elder in the church. And so we're going to look at this letter, but Paul was specifically writing this to Titus, and apparently he and Titus, even though there's not a lot of record of this, there's a couple of mentions in the book of Acts, but they spent some time apparently on the island of Crete and had planted some churches all around that little island that's nestled in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. And they had planted some churches on different parts of the island, some ecclesias, these gatherings of believers. And then Paul left. Thanks, Paul. Went there together and he left. And he said, Titus, I want you to stay here. I've got some things for you to do. You need to continue teaching and providing leadership to all these churches. You need to nurture them. You need to make sure that they stay on the right path and continue to follow the things that we've taught. And then you need to raise up some elders, some leaders within each of these churches in order to be appointed there and to lead in those environments. And then at some point in the future, Paul writes back to Titus, and he's wanting to remind him, as we often do with letters, right? I just want to encourage you, remind you of some things that you need to be doing. And then in the second half of chapter 1, which is just his letter, there's not really chapter and verse in the letter, so he's just, but at the second part of chapter 1, Paul's just saying, look, he's rebuking actually the people who were not living according to what they were actually saying. There was a gap between, well, this is what I'm teaching, and called them false teachers or Judaizers in some cases, and he says these people are just teaching something, but they're not living it. And he at the end of that chapter, he even says that their lives are useless. That hurts. It's like there's such a gap between what they say and what they do that their lives are useless. And then he shifts gears, and so he's kind of pointing the finger at Titus, and he said, so I want to encourage you not to do that. I want to teach you how to teach. I want to teach you how to encourage the next generation of people because you have been put in a position of authority, and I want you to have influence. You've got authority because you were the one that was there, but now I want you to have influence. And so I want you to teach some things. I want you to share some things. At the very beginning of chapter 2, he says, you, however, he's pointing to Titus. He's saying, Titus, you, however, must teach what is appropriate to sound doctrine. The word teach, literally to speak. It's verbal communication. He's literally talking about just teaching. I want you to teach, but teach with sound doctrine, with a good foundation. Teach the truths of Jesus Christ and his gospel, not just the periphery, not the things that other people argue about and are divisive within the church. I'm just like, I want your message to be clear, to be sound, to be true. Okay, well, great. And then he begins to spell out the things that he wants them to teach. And he kind of splits it up by gender between male and female and even by, older generations and younger generations. And he says, I want you to teach these things to these groups of people. Kind of contextualizes. He says, teach the older men. And then he spells out a few things. He says, and likewise, teach the older women. Spells out some things he wants them to teach. And then he says the older women can then urge the younger women. They can then kind of communicate. It's like they can in turn impact the next generation of ladies. And then verse 6, he says, similarly encourage the young men. And he kind of gives them different ideas. And it's like, because it's not a comprehensive list that he's given to each of these, but these were just some things I can just imagine, when you're writing something and you rabbit trail, and Paul was good at that. Like he'd just kind of have different thoughts, and he was writing some things down. It's what he shifts into in verse 7, because it's like he had a moment of like, okay, hold up. I'm giving you my list. These are the things I want you to teach, but there's more to it. It's not just what I want you to teach, but how I want you to teach it that's important. And see, this is where we kind of begin to see that there's maybe an opportunity to bridge a divide, a gap. He says there's more to teaching than just your verbal communication. That's great, and those are the things, but let me interject here for a minute. Pause, Titus. I've been talking about the what, but let me just tell you about the how. Let me make sure you're doing this. And listen to what he says. So good. In everything, set them an example by doing what is good. In everything. In other words, everything I've just laid out, all the teaching, this list, the groups of people, the things that I want you to say, the things that I want you to communicate to them, maybe even write down and hand it out. Like I want you to, this is the stuff. And in all that, in everything, yes, I want you to communicate it verbally, but in everything, set the example. I want you to set the example. I want you to live it out. Listen to this. The word example there is the Greek word tupos. Tupos. I know you wanted to know that. Here's what's interesting, though. It could be translated example or model or pattern, but it's where we get our English word type. Now, if you're old enough to remember, like old typewriters, okay? Archaic type, like I am old enough to remember having used, not a lot because I was young, was very, very young. And I remember using an old typewriter. We're talking, these were typewriters, young people, unless you've seen a picture, you don't know what this is like. I mean, they had these type bars, okay? And when you would press a key, the type bar would sling forward and it would press into an ink ribbon and then make an impression onto the piece of paper. That's how it worked. And man, if you got going too fast, if you were one of these, like 10 words a minute, one of those fast typers, that was honestly probably pretty fast on one of those things, because when you get going too fast, some of those type bars would sling up together. They get caught and you have to adjust it and you get ink on your fingers, and it was kind of a pain, right? Man, it was hard to correct what you were typing. But here's what's interesting. That is the word type with that picture in mind, where we get the idea of being an example. It's the idea of making an impression on the hearts and the lives of the people around you. See what I'm saying? When you teach, Titus, I want you to teach in a way that's like typing onto somebody's heart, and it leaves an impression. It slings forward, it catches the ink, and it sticks it onto their heart, and they can't help but see. Your words are great. Your words are great, but you just communicating words into a microphone isn't enough. I want you to imprint it, impress it onto their lives. And the way that you're going to do that is by living it. There needs to be no gap between the words that you're saying and the impression that you make through the way that you live. As small a gap as possible. That's what needs to happen. Here's what William Barclay, he was a commentator, here's what he said about this passage. He said, if Titus's teaching is to be effective, or insert your own name, it must be backed by the witness of his own life. He is himself to be the demonstration of all that he teaches. Titus is the demonstration of everything that comes out of his mouth. It's one thing to say it, and that's what Paul was rebuking the other teachers, the false teachers, saying they were just full of words, but their lives didn't reflect it. Their life was useless as a result. And so I'm just telling you, and we all know this, right? There's no rocket science here. He's saying your lives should be the very demonstration, the very example of what it means to live out the things that you're talking about. The things you say you believe, the things you think are important, the things that you want to teach, the things that you want to disseminate to the people coming behind you in a job or in a position or with your kids or whatever it is. It's not enough to just have a position and to try to kind of flex your authority into their lives, because we can do that and we can force people to do certain things within reason just because of our position. But you can't actually influence their lives with that alone. There has to be a demonstration. It has to be typed onto their lives. Paul wrote some of the very same words to Timothy, and you can literally, it's just right before this. I mean, you can flip back just a few pages if you're in your Bible. And this is the way he put it to Timothy. He encouraged him in the same way. He said, command and teach these things, all the things that he's just laid out. Command and teach these things verbally. Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young. Like, apparently he was young. He was worried, that people weren't going to really listen to what he was saying. He was saying, well, don't worry about it. You know how you're not going to worry about it? But set an example for the believers in speech and conduct and love and faith and in purity. That's how. You're going to be an example. It's the same word. You're going to type it and impress it onto their lives, not because you spoke eloquently. You're young, Timothy. They want to see it. If you want to talk about what it means to be generous and to sacrifice and to live for other people, then do that. Don't just talk about it. He was saying the same thing to Titus. He's saying, this is what is important, and this is how I want you to teach. And then he follows, he says, this is what this looks like. The example needs to look this way. In your teaching, not just your verbal teaching, but in your example teaching, your demonstrating, show integrity. Show integrity. Demonstrate integrity. Seriousness, or another word is dignity, and soundness of speech that cannot be condemned. That's how you're going to do it. If you want to teach in everything, you need to be the example, and here's what the example looks like. You need to be a person of integrity. Integrity is literally, you know what this is? It's when there's a firm foundation based on words aligning with action. That's a person of integrity. That's the person that you look up to and you think, man, they are who they say they are. That's awesome. They don't just talk the talk, like they walk it. They live it. This is who they are. They don't just say they believe it. They live like they believe it. I honestly believe they would die for what they believe, even though I don't know that I believe what they believe. But I believe that they believe what they say they believe because they live it. Just write that down. I don't remember what I said, but we get this, right? We understand the difference between talking and actually living a certain way. We know this. So it's integrity. And then there's dignity or seriousness. And it's not being haughty or uptight or, obnoxious and prideful and arrogant. That's not what he's talking about, being dignified. He's just saying, take very seriously the responsibility that you have to speak into other people's lives. In other words, guard yourself. Be careful how you live around other people, how you respond to things, how you talk around them, the jokes you tell, the movies you watch, the things you do. In other words, it's your responsibility. If you want to communicate to them through your life, then there needs to be a seriousness about the responsibility that you have to do so. And then a soundness of speech could literally be reflected in these words, a healthy message or a whole message. In other words, don't spend all your time on the things that divide, all the peripheral issues, the things where there's disagreement. Churches are good at this. Every church has its thing about what they think is most important, and yet we all, honestly, the majority of us agree on the things that actually matter the most. But we get caught up in arguments and things that divide us because we don't agree on some peripheral issues, and he's just saying that stuff is meaningless. He even says that later in his letter. He's like, those arguments are useless and meaningless. Don't get caught up in those. I want your speech to be whole. I want your message to be healthy. And then he says, here's the result. So that those who oppose you may be ashamed because they have nothing bad to say about us. That's going to be the end result. Not just in you teaching, through your words and spelling all those things, because I gave you the list. Every generation, speak this, do that, say this. But, make sure you live it too. And you're going to have an opportunity as a result of that kind of teaching. You're going to have real influence in people's lives, and they're going to see things differently. Matter of fact, the people who oppose you are the people who are waiting on you to mess up. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I don't know, oppose enemies. No. I'm just talking about a generation of people, whether that's your kids or your students or your players, they're watching you. You know what? They're not sitting around on pins and needles going, I can't wait to hear what they say next about what they believe, about what they think is important. I don't care. You know what? They're watching. That's what they're doing. They're not just listening to what you have to say about what you believe. They're watching to see if your life reflects what you say you believe. You know why I know that? Because that's what I do. And that's what all of you do. We want people to be who they say they are. Do we not? Is that not common to every individual? Is that not a point of commonality that might very well could bridge the gap between generations? Is to just, I don't know, be who you say you are. Hey, you know what? There's a lot of differences, a lot of things I don't understand about you, but you know what? I'm going to make sure that I live what I say and believe. I'm not just going to try to force it down your throat. I just want to live it. And I want you to see that I believe it and that I'm living it. Position establishes authority, not influence, as we said. We get caught off guard sometimes. We forget. Because we think, it's just our position that we can kind of force people into certain things and to do certain things and to kind of flex our power a little bit. When the reality is we're not influencing them at all. And so if you want to influence somebody, be who you say you are. And so here's how this kind of looks. So it's like, what is that? It's not enough because, this is so obvious. Matter of fact, this is the very thing we teach, young people. We tell them all the time. Man, you need to, your walk needs to match your talk, or that kind. Like we say stuff like that. We talk that way. We understand this. It's what we want. We just kind of forgot, because we grew up and we got irritated with people that thought differently. And so we forgot, like, what matters is how I react to them, not just what I say to them. And so I was like, what is it? What's that feature? What's that characteristic that makes us the same? Because at the end of the day, let me remind you, all of you are going to be in a position where you have the potential to influence because you have the keys, you have the knowledge, you have something they don't have because you've been there, you've done that, you are in that position, and you have an opportunity. And so if you don't understand them, then try to figure out what you do understand. And you know what they want just as much as you know what you want. And you are longing for authenticity. Authentic people. Real. I mean, don't you? I mean, it's almost a buzzword. I just want an authentic experience. I want the real deal. And we all want that. Nobody would say, well, who I really want to follow is somebody that's completely fake. I've never met anybody that would say that. Well, I want to follow that guy because he talks a really good talk, but he does not live it. I want that guy. Will you coach me? No, we want somebody that's real, don't we? Somebody that is authentic, that is credible, that's believable, that doesn't just say stuff. Man, you want your kids to listen to you. They need to know that you mean what you say. That there is an authenticity to your life. If you are going to drag them to church, then you better live like you care about church and what you say you believe and sing about on Sunday morning if you want them to like it. Doesn't that make sense? I mean, it's amazing what we do sometimes. We want that kind of authenticity. We understand that. It's not just young people. It's all of us. We want that. And at some point, this is what you'll begin to figure out, because you knew this when you were young. We just have a tendency to kind of forget that the greatest lessons that other people will ever hear from you are the ones they never have to hear from you. You should take a picture, write that down, or just memorize it, because that's a good way to process that. Because we all get, oh yeah, I need to, talk my walk and walk my talk and, the best things that you will ever teach to somebody are the things that you don't have to verbally teach. because you live it, because you model it, because you type it onto their hearts. You exemplify it. Your life looks like it. You know what authenticity looks like? It's transparency. I think that's one of the characteristics of being authentic. It's being transparent. And guarded transparency. Being smart and wise about what you share and how much you reveal about who you are. But daggum, let's be real with each other. People, you know, we love the intimacy of very close relationships. Do you know why? Because we're able to be authentic in that environment. That's what it is. We're just real. And people need to know you're real. I literally do my best up on this stage because I realize very quickly, you know, like since I'm up here the majority of the time and I have a microphone, that there is a tendency, especially if you don't know me very well, a tendency to look up here and go, oh, that guy, like he reads the Bible and stuff and like has his life together. I bet he never struggles with what I struggle with. I bet he never has. I do my best to say, to let you know that, hey, yeah, I do. I mean, I don't mind telling you some of my stories. I do it all the time. I want you to see, like, I want you to be able to relate to me and me to you. I want you to feel like, hey, I can trust that guy. Like he does know what I'm feeling. He ain't just talking. Man, how often do you feel preached at instead of like preached with and taught? And you get to watch somebody and there's an authenticity, it's transparency, and it's also just like a genuine concern, care. Don't you think that's what people want? Like that, it feels authentic and real when you feel like it's not just, you know, a power struggle. It's not just somebody, you know, trying to get something done through you or trying to, you know, exercise some sort of control over you. But when they feel like, I think they actually care. I think they actually care about me. They really do want me to succeed and to do well. They really do love me. I'm not sure I like what they're saying. I'm not sure I agree with everything they say and what they say they believe, but man, they believe it, and it's real for them, and I'm willing to listen. I may not like it all, but I'm willing to listen to people like that, you know? So here's kind of the practical component to this, and you'll have to figure this one out on your own. I'm just giving you a little bit, you know, a little pocket guide to refer to. Oh yeah, that's right, authentic. What matters should be demonstrated. What is demonstrated is communicated. What matters to you, what you say you believe, what you say is important, it's got to be demonstrated if you want to ultimately communicate it. That's the way you're going to get that message across. That's the way you're going to bridge that gap. That's the way you're going to say, hey, you know what? It doesn't matter that we don't see eye to eye. It's why you see sometimes like really goofy coaches who like know nothing about cool or, you know, what's in and what's out, and yet there's such an authenticity to them that it's like the Pied Piper. Everybody wants to be around them, you know? It's not because they were hip and cool and understood everything about their culture. It's just because they were real. Like, I'm a real guy. People need to see that. You need to see it. It's what you long for too. And here's what's amazing. This is what your Heavenly Father did. That's what He did. God was not content with more information. God was not content to say, well, I gave you all of this law and all these stories, and I've given you prophets and judges, and I've given you people to lead and to guide you, and I've fulfilled promises among you, and I've reminded you, you need to remind everybody, and they need to remind everybody, and every generation needs to talk about it and sing about it and remember it and think about it so that you'll remember me. And like, matter of fact, it was a part of His plan to do it this way, where it was like, I'm going to disseminate information, and you're going to realize it's not enough. I'm going to give you my law, I'm going to give you my word, but you're going to realize it's not enough. So He left heaven, put on flesh, and He demonstrated His word. He became a demonstration, a living example of what it meant to live an authentic life. He didn't say, well, I want you to sacrifice, and then didn't sacrifice. He made the ultimate sacrifice. He didn't say, well, I want you to be really generous and then not be generous. He was generous. Everything that he taught verbally, he demonstrated physically and through his life. He spoke it. I want you to give of yourself. I want you to love unconditionally. And then they watched him love unconditionally. I want you to have grace, unending grace. And then he exercised and demonstrated unending grace. And it's available. And he's authentic. He's real. There's no hoax. There's no agenda other than an opportunity to receive that. To say, I want to be authentic. And so I want to know the creator of authenticity. I want to know it and I want to live it. I want to be a generational genius so that I can speak that message clearly, boldly, and authentically. Let me pray for us. Jesus, thank you for putting on flesh and demonstrating authenticity. What it looks like to be real, what it looks like not just to teach, but to do. What it looks like to not just to pass something on verbally, but to live it out, to demonstrate it, and to be an example. God, thank you for that. Thank you for not stopping at your word, but sending your living word to be among us and to live in us and through us. Father, I lift up every person in this room. Every person within the sound of my voice, no matter what stage of life they are in, what position of authority they may have, whether they're younger, older, somewhere in between, female, male, at some point, they're going to be in a position where they have an opportunity to speak into people. And God, I pray that you would give them patience. Give them humility, authenticity in their lives. And I pray that it would be expressed through the way that they live, that they would set the example, that their lives would be like that type bar, making an impression onto somebody's lives. One letter at a time, one act at a time, one expression of love and faith and compassion at a time. God, may we express that to the people around us. We long for it, and so do the people around us. They long for this. May we become authentic to the world around us. People of integrity, people who do what we say, who live what we believe, and may it reflect you and bring you glory in the matchless name of Jesus. Amen.